What if life isn't some kind of miracle? What if it's not a magical spark, but actually a brilliant, almost inevitable strategy for managing chaos? Today, we're going to dive into a pretty radical idea, that life is the universe's ultimate entropy engine.
Okay, so here's the fundamental paradox, right? The one that has puzzled scientists for centuries. The universe has one big overarching rule. Everything falls apart. It's called entropy. And yet, just look around. A tree, a single cell, you. You are all these masterpieces of incredible, intricate order. So how can life possibly exist? For the longest time, it really seemed like biology was locked in this impossible losing battle against the fundamental laws of physics. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if life isn't fighting the wave of chaos, but is actually surfing it? The latest thinking is that life doesn't defy the second law of thermodynamics at all. Instead, it's an absolute master at exploiting it. Life doesn't break the rules, it just plays the game better than anything else in the entire universe.
So how does it do it? Well, the key is to understand that life isn't just managing one kind of chaos, it's managing two. And it uses this strategy that works kind of like a clever accounting system for survival.
This whole double-entry bookkeeping metaphor is just perfect. Think about it. Every single living thing has to balance two different ledgers. One of them tracks the chaos of its physical parts, its body. And the other one tracks the chaos of information and uncertainty about the world around it. So that first ledger, that's what we call Boltzmann entropy. This is physical chaos, the entropy of stuff. Imagine a hot cup of coffee in a cold room. The heat doesn't just stay in the cup, right? It spreads out until everything is just lukewarm. That's Boltzmann entropy in action. For a living thing, fighting this means holding your structure together and not just, dissolving into the environment.
The second ledger tracks something called Shannon entropy. Now, this is all about informational chaos, or maybe a simpler way to put it is surprise. Imagine you're walking through a forest. If you can predict where the berries are and where the predators might be hiding, your uncertainty, your Shannon entropy, is low. If everything is a total surprise, you probably won't last very long. All right, so let's dig into the first part of this game, controlling that physical chaos. How does life manage its Boltzmann entropy and keep its structure from literally just falling apart? This is the exact question that the physicist Erwin Schrödinger famously asked way back in 1944. His book, What is Life?, basically kicked off this entire way of thinking. He knew, deep down, that any real theory of life had to answer this question first. And the solution he came up with was frankly brilliant. Life isn't some closed box totally isolated from the world. No, it's an open system. It keeps its own internal order by constantly taking in high-quality energy, like sunlight or food, and then just dumping low-quality waste heat and disorder back out into its surroundings. Basically, it stays neat by making its environment messier. Building on that idea, Nobel laureate Ilya Prigogine showed that order isn't just possible, it can actually be spontaneous. When you have a constant flow of energy, what he called a gradient, moving through a system, complex patterns can just emerge, all on their own. He called these patterns dissipative structures. And this is such a great way to think about it. A hurricane isn't fighting the second law of thermodynamics, it's an incredibly effective way for the universe to get rid of a heat gradient. It's an engine for producing entropy. And from this point of view, so is life. This all leads to a truly radical idea, one championed by researchers like Eric Schneider and James Kay. And it's this: life isn't some improbable accident. It's a natural, almost predictable thing that happens whenever you've got a planet with a massive energy gradient, like the one beaming down from our sun into the cold of space. Okay, so here's the crucial part for the physical game. Life is a hyper-efficient way to take the high-quality concentrated energy from the sun, use it, and then radiate it back out into space as messy, low-quality heat. You could almost say life is a chemical network that has evolved for one main purpose: to speed up chaos. And its own beautiful, complex structure, that's just a byproduct of that whole process. But, just being a fancy structure that dissipates energy isn't quite enough. A hurricane does that, but we don't call it alive. And that's because we've only covered half the story. Now we get to the second, much more subtle part of the strategy, the information game. This is where Shannon entropy comes back into play. The neuroscientist Friston has this thing called the free energy principle, which basically argues that to stay alive is to minimize surprise. Think about it. An organism that's constantly being surprised by its environment, that's an organism that is probably about to die. Just think about your own body.
It needs to keep its temperature, its blood sugar, even its physical location all within a very narrow, very predictable range. Being surprised by, say, suddenly finding yourself at the bottom of a lake is not good for survival. So to stay in that safe zone, you have to constantly predict what's going to happen and then act to correct for any changes. You are, at your core, a prediction machine, constantly working to reduce your uncertainty about the world.
But here's the catch. Gathering and processing all that information, it isn't free. And this is exactly where those two ledgers, the Boltzmann and the Shannon, finally connect. Information has a real physical cost. So here is the fundamental trade-off of all life. To control your physical body and just keep it from falling apart, you have to burn energy. And to make that whole process more efficient, you gather information to reduce surprise. But building things like eyes and ears, running a brain, storing memories, all of that has a very real energy cost too.
And this leads us to a really crucial insight. An organism can't possibly pay attention to everything. It has to filter out the signal from the noise. It only cares about the information that actually has meaning for its survival.
Researchers even have a name for this. They call it semantic information. Let me put it this way. The rustling leaves in a forest contain all sorts of information, right? About the wind, the weather, but the one specific rustle, that means tiger, that is the only piece of information that has real meaning. That's the information that helps you take action to stay alive.
Okay, so let's try to put this all together. We've got the physical game of Boltzmann control, and we've got the information game of Shannon exploitation. How do they work together to create this single, unified strategy that we call life? Well, here's how the information pays for the physics. Gaining information, like knowing where the food is, lets you reduce the amount of physical energy you waste. You spend less time searching around, which hopefully saves way more energy than it costs to get that information in the first place. And evolution? It is just a relentless optimizer for this exact trade-off, always selecting for the strategies that get the highest value per bit.
And this brings us to a really powerful, all-encompassing new definition. Life isn't a thing, it's a process. It's a system that maintains its physical order by constantly burning energy, and it makes that whole process way more efficient by using meaningful information to guide its actions, keeping it safe and sound in that narrow little zone of survival.
You know, reframing life as this entropy management engine is just incredibly powerful. It suggests that the entire living world is really just one big system for dissipating energy, a system that happened to grow a nervous system to do it more effectively. And that leaves us with one final, pretty fascinating question. What happens next? Now that this planetary life form is in the process of growing a global, digital nervous system,